Earlier this week, Iran's soccer team refused to sing their national anthem at the World Cup. It reminded people around the globe of the ongoing protests in that country and the government crackdown trying to put an end to more than 2 months of nationwide unrest. Prompted by the killing of a young woman in police custody in September, the unofficial motto of protesters is Woman, Life, Freedom. Joining us now for more, in Waterloo, Ontario, Besma Momani, Professor of Political Science at the University of Waterloo and a Senior Fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation. And here in our studio, Hossein Rahisi, Adjunct Research Professor in the Department of Law and Legal Studies at Carleton University. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, to set up our conversation, let's get a sense of what's happening on the grounds in Iran. This was written in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week. Businesses have closed their doors, students have staged campus sit-ins, women have publicly defied laws requiring headscarves and modest dress, workers have gone on strike in key industries, mourners at the graves of protesters killed by authorities have coalesced in pop-up anti-government rallies. In response, the government has used pellet guns and tear gas, arrested demonstrators en masse, cracked down on university students, shut down the internet, and claimed that riots were the work of foreign spies. Hossein, I'm going to come to you. You have not been in the country, of course, for over a decade, but you do have friends, family there. I want to get a sense, how well do we know that these things are happening? Because it's hard to get this information verified, particularly from this guy.
Yeah, this is actually a unique phenomena in Iran because so far after 1979 revolution, Iranian, especially women, were facing many discrimination and systematic discrimination. But people try to bring some reform changes peacefully and through the electoral system. But unfortunately, Iranian authority always close all doors and bringing up more pressure on the people and also more discrimination. And actually, Iranian government haven't listened to Iranian people and protesters in 2009, 2017, 2019, and finally, people came out after Mahsa Jina Amini has been killed by the authorities, by the morality police, and actually at this time, unrest, protests uprising around the country, more than 155 cities and many universities involving and demanding changing core of the government, and they are demanding freedom and normal life. And because Iranian government banning normal life, such as social and political and civil, actually freedom to the people, especially to the women, minorities, and ethnic minorities especially. And yeah, they are demanding changing, and they came out and they don't want to stop.
Besma, I'm going to come to you. Hossein had mentioned 152 cities are taking part. This protest is evolving. Can you give us a sense as well, how has the protest evolved since it began in late September?
Well, some interesting phenomena that we're seeing. I mean, certainly the actual average age of the protesters just seems to be getting younger and younger. Certainly the universities are absolutely on fire, and they have been a site of contest for many, many years. But absolutely in this particular time, we're seeing universities really on flames. But we're also seeing high school students and even school children. I mean, this is what is so tragic about this entire situation, is that there are so many children being killed and maimed and injured and arrested. But that doesn't seem to stop. And also, as we see, in commemoration of the death of all of these protesters on the 40th day, it just brings a renewed, sense of defiance. And in fact, protests at the grave sites themselves are becoming extremely much a part of the new protest movement. The other thing I would say that is quite unique and quite interesting about this is that there's a lot more ethnic minorities involved. And in fact, I would say the government is being far more repressive on ethnic minorities than ever. And there's a number of reasons for that, quite simply divide and rule, and trying to break the unison of the Iranian people that we're seeing across so many sectors, whether it's socioeconomic and ethno-cultural communities, but absolutely even regional. But there, can't be ignored that there's two regions in particular: the Kurdish regions in Iran, and certainly Baluchistan, which is really taking the ire most of the state. Far more repression there, far more deaths. In the case of Baluchistan, we don't even know, I think, accurate numbers, partly because of low internet penetration there and low smartphone penetration. But, if we did, I think we'd see a disproportionate amount of enormous repression by the government in those areas. Not to say that Tehran and other parts of Iran aren't facing that repression, but there is absolutely a government tactic of really trying to divide and rule with the targeting of ethnic minorities in particular.
We will definitely touch on a little bit of that later, particularly what's happening at the border as well. I want to stick with you, Besma, and I want to talk about sort of the history here. And Hussein had mentioned 1978, 1979. A lot of people don't know the history behind the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian Revolution. And I want to get your take on how unprecedented this moment in time is right now and why people should be gluing in and paying attention to what's happening right now on the grounds there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of people making some similarities between what's happening now and in 1979. I think the way to think about the 1979 revolution is almost it's accidental in the sense that there was a political vacuum and a leadership vacuum at the time. Absolutely great amount of frustration with the Shah, who was increasingly corrupt, out of touch, very much repressive with what was called the Savaks at the time. And that really raised an enormous amount of consciousness. University students were a big part of this back then, too. I mean, student movement in the 1979 revolution were absolutely instrumental. But what I think was accidental about this was the theocracy that was born as a result. In fact, the Islamic Revolution became accidental because one of the few charismatic leaders that could take the pulpit quite literally ended up being Khomeini himself, who came from exile back to Iran. Now, I think where the similarities here, of course, is the youth movement aspect of this revolution. This is a leaderless revolution, which I think is very interesting. On the one hand, it's great because it means that the regime can't clamp down and go after one individual or a group of people. It's far more widespread and sporadic. But the fact that it's leaderless, and this is perhaps our own Western fixation on trying to always find who's the leader, who is the group that we can speak to as an interlocutor in some way, does mean that it's a bit more difficult to pinpoint and to really accurately predict where this is going.
Very interesting. I'm going to return back, Hussein. I want to talk about the children and the youth there. Besma had talked about sort of a wide age range, but it's really this generation, Gen Zs, millennials, children who are taking to the front lines here. Do we have an idea of what's happening to children and youth? I know the numbers, there are a number of numbers as high as 50 children are dying, again, unverified, but do you have a sense of what's happening?
That's a great point. At this time, Iranian young, especially high school generation, attending the unrest protests around the country because they don't have anything to lose it, because they are every day they are witnesses that their friends, their parents, their families actually have to hiding something, have to have a different personality with the government, in the street, in the school, in the house, and yeah, actually they are facing no hope in the future, and then they made a decision and to joining the protest and actually demanding the freedom and having a normal life, because the Iranian government actually banned any hope for their future, and also actually banned any sort of the development and the social, economic, and cultural development for them that they really needed. And actually, it means their future hugely at risk by the government and the brutal system. It means they are the main source, and they are a group that they have to join in, and they understand. And also, they don't want an Islamic regime. because the Islamic system banning everything in front of them. So they're joining and they're demanding a huge change that they would need it for their future.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit. Off the top, we had talked about the World Cup in terms of what is being seen to the rest of the world. Earlier this week, we saw that the Iran soccer team did were silent during the anthem. It's similar to sort of what we see here in West, where people take their knees during the anthem. How significant was that moment there?
Unfortunately, today except two of them, they singing. They are singing, but actually, many of the soccer players, celebrities, they are joining the unrest protest and supporting, especially Ali Karimi, Ali Daei, and many of them. And yesterday, one of the actually famous from the ethnic minority Kurdish region has been arrested, unfortunately. And they became a champion, a real champion, to be with the people. And people around the social media, around in the street, they are saying their names, and they're doing the best thing to support Iranian society, because this is the situation is not only for some part of the country. We know, as Professor Mamani has mentioned, about the ethnic minorities. We know they paid huge prices so far, and especially in this situation. But it's not only for one group. Many groups of the people, especially soccer players and other champions, they are joining and supporting, especially females athletic. They did a great job to support, and they demanding same as young generation students from universities and high schools to bring changes in core of the society, because based on the Iranian constitution, we cannot bring any changes without targeting core of the government.
All right, Besma, I want to get your take in here. Of course, not just the soccer field. We're talking about very famous actors, actresses speaking out. But what I want to talk about is, will there be repercussions for people returning home who have shown some sort of form of support to protesters?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the great risk that they take. They are very much taking a lot of risk in being very vocal outside of Iran in particular. And we see this. We see arrest warrants being issued. We saw this famous, singer who really created the anthem of this revolution in many ways, being arrested and not being heard from. So many people have disappeared. We don't know whether or not they're in prison, whether they've been killed. There's enormous pain and suffering on the streets of Iran today, where indeed people do not know where their loved ones are. And as I said, this skews young. So we're talking about children. I mean, the faces of some of these young people, a 16-year-old that just got killed not too long ago, this young boy, these faces, I don't know what else to say other than really it just makes me shudder, because it's just unbelievable. And back to my colleague's point about this generation. This is the happy generation. They go on TikTok and Instagram, and there's one of the things that is so tragic about this is that with every killing and murder of these young people, there's an enormous storyline of these young people, being kids, being young people, enjoying life to their fullest, trying to bring what little happiness they can in their everyday, because of a repressive regime where they can't even show happiness on the outside, on the street, and smile and be their happy selves. They have to really kind of express that in enormously talented ways in their own living rooms. And it's really quite remarkable. So what we end up seeing is this timeline of young kids just being happy, trying to live a normal life in an abnormal situation of a society and a regime that really does not want them to have fun, quite literally. And so it really is just so tragic. The faces and names are just too numerous to count.
Besma, I want to stick with you. I'm going to ask you a follow-up. In terms of the information that is coming out, the very little information that is, it's very hard to verify. I'm curious to know how much of what we know that's coming out of Iran is a tactic in a way, so the government can sort of deny sort of the allegations, because it's sort of hard to prove.
Yeah, we've seen the regime, trying to outsmart society. I mean, for example, there was a very interesting New York Times report suggesting that they were using ambulances not to actually save people, but to actually arrest people. We are absolutely seeing them throttle the internet repeatedly. In places, in particular in Kurdish and in the Baluchistan, we're seeing that even more so. They're trying not to, I would say, completely shut down the internet in Tehran because they know the economic consequences that would be enormous. And we saw that in the 2017 up to 2019 protests, where it really caused a lot of great damage to the economy, and they don't want to do that. But that's not to say that they don't throttle it, they don't selectively using it, turning it off at night or in evenings when protests are more likely to happen, giving preferential internet access to state-owned enterprises and certain state companies. There are a whole bunch of tactics they're trying to do without completely shutting off the internet. I think one of the things that is so powerful is, and my kudos to the enormously talented diaspora community, the second largest being in this country, they are really the voice of so many of Iranians on the ground. They're the ones doing the brave work of also ensuring that these images and these videos come out. In some cases, the Kurdish community are smuggling this through the border into Iraq, into fellow Kurdish regions there, where they are also trying to beam out their stories. I mean, there's enormous creativity. I mean, the Iranian people are so incredibly creative and talented. So it doesn't surprise me that they're able to do this. They're using VPNs and other ways of outsmarting the system and the regime. But make no mistake, I think the voice of the Iranian people will come out one way or another because of how talented and determined they are. And the regime is absolutely using every tool at their disposal to prevent that.
All right, Hossein, I want to get you in here. We talked about the diaspora. We've seen some large protests here just north of our studio in Vaughan, just large numbers. I want to get an idea of how the unrest in Iran is affecting the diaspora here. Are they hopeful?
Actually, always Iranian diaspora try to be in contact with the Iranian society in general, but specifically, since we have more than 50 human rights NGOs out of the country, and they are working around the globe to support Iranian civil society and educate them, and also in some sort of situation help them financially, and also based on some knowledge, exchanging knowledge. They are always diaspora helping Iranian civil society. And at this point, it was phenomena because at the same time that Iranian came out since actually September 16, diaspora came out and brought so far many attention to international community, and also asking the UN, different part of the UN, to be a voice of the Iranian inside of the country. And at the same time, brutal government and security force, many people have been arrested. More than 18,000 so far have been arrested. And every day, crackdown have been increasing, and diaspora became more sensitive to asking international community and also UN, and asking for the UN human rights mechanism to be voice and doing something and making something to hold Iranian authority accountable about their situation, about kidnapping kids, even kidnapping body of some people that have been killed. Because of that, the diaspora did a great job to bring attention to the world. And today is totally different. That you are walking around Toronto and asking some Torontonian about the Iranian uprising. Everyone knows that. It means everyone in the world knows that what happened in Iran. And yesterday we were witness that the Human Rights Council made a great step to appointed a findings mission for actually Iran for first time. It was our first time in the world that this happened. It means actually UN and international community listened to us, diaspora, and made a great step based on diaspora activities.
All right, I want to follow up with Basma on that. Of course, we know the United Nations announced it's launching a human rights investigation. What does the international community need to do? What type of pressure needs to be put on the international community to act? It seems like there is movement, and it is the diaspora that is pushing that, but what needs to happen there?
Well, it's a bit tough. And I think the international environment is not, sadly, helping the Iranian people. This is not to suggest that the diaspora community should stop in terms of this pressure campaign. And certainly the Human Rights Council is a good step. It's disappointing to see so many countries abstain. Many of them are just really afraid to really get on the bad side with Iran. But nevertheless, this will really provide 30 independent investigators who will collect evidence, really make a case, and it will, I think, put the Iranian regime on alert to really point out that they are no longer going to get away with this. It's really important. I think it's not just symbolic. It does potentially have teeth. And this is not a council, frankly, that has been favorable to the Iranian people, because the regime has played a role on that council historically as well, I should point out. That said, I think that's a really good move. I'm afraid that we're also looking at a perfect storm internationally where there is going to be a lot of silence. It really makes me very sad to say that, but analytically, I can't help but feel that there is a cone of silence, if you will, partly because of the energy crisis. I think we can talk about that further if that's of interest, but really, I think people are afraid that this is a very troublesome winter in terms of the energy crisis before us. Inflation is a big global economic problem. And of course, Iran is a major oil producer. And despite the fact that there are sanctions on Iranian oil, the reality is that there is a lot of Iranian oil leakage going to countries like China, India, and others. And that really is, I think, still keeping the prices, if you will, somewhat constant, and the fear of the spike is there globally.
All right, we only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure I can get a couple questions in here. Hussein, over 2 months in, do we know how long this unrest will go for?
Actually, this is not so easy to say how long it's going to be on. But peaceful protest usually takes time, but not longer than 3 years. But we know that we made Iranian people inside of the country, they made a decision to bring changes. And it means more than 2 months, they are all the time in the street and asking with different voices and different ways for changing. And it means it's going to bring changes. And already something happened, some changes have happened now, because Iranian people cannot get back to before September 16 ever. You know what? Because they are demanding freedom, and their slogan, Zan Zindagi Azadi, women, life, liberties, it means this is the sign for them forever, and this is the sign of very modern revolution. And the revolution has been started, and it cannot stop. No one can stop. And demanding changes, it happened already, and also is going to continue to bring whole core changes within the government, and people, they don't demand Islamic regime, and it must go.
Basma, I got about 30 seconds left. Hoping you can help us give us an idea of what potentially could happen in the next couple of months, and what do you want to see happen?
Well, I think this needs to start to spread to the professional associations. We've seen a little bit of that with some industrial workers, particularly in the oil and gas industry and some aspects of the merchant class. But I think we need to see this to move into key economic sectors that continue to face trials and tribulations at the hands of the regime. Farmers, again, professional associations. The sad part here is the reformists inside the country have lost all legitimacy. No one wants to hear from them, but they're the most identified opposition in the country, many of them still in prison. So it's a bit of a delicate situation. As I said, it's leaderless. It needs to start to have some, I think, deeper momentum beyond the youth. Again, we have so much inspiration from the youth. but it needs to get into other sectors of society. So that's what I'm looking for. And I think the professional associations is the place to watch.
Do you expect it, Besma, to get worse before it gets better?
Yes, because it can't go back. Husseini is absolutely right. It's not going to go back. The genie's out of the bottle that way. There's no going back. And I think, we could see possibly the regime say, okay, there's no more morality police. They're never going to say no hijab, but they might just say no morality police. We're disbanding it, blah, blah, blah. That I don't think is enough, because I think people realize that they're fed up of not just the hijab. It's so much more. So we'll see. I think, I agree with the timeline. I think this is going to be a slow burn. And it really is about whether or not there's going to be other groups that are, again, more older, more cemented, more powerful, that start to get involved in this movement.
Besma, Hossein, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.